Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Eigel. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science. Talk a little bit today about a flipped classroom. First, let me tell you a little bit about my teaching experiences. I kind of have a broad range. I started out teaching as a PhD student in a very compressed summer session where you teach every day and teaching programming to students every single day. I don't know if that's the really best fit, but it was my introduction to teaching. And then I taught that same course in a class of 150 during the semester. So it's a totally different experience. Up on the stage, I had to wear a microphone, a little intimidating. But since then, I haven't had any fear of talking in front of people or teaching. I worked at Clemson University for a couple years, and I've been at ODU since 2006. Here, I taught undergraduate and graduate courses. I've developed a couple of graduate courses, including the one that I'm talking about today, and also I developed a course for our online graduate master's program in computer science. So what is a flipped classroom? So you're all familiar with the traditional classroom, where there's maybe a reading assignment that you might do before you come to class. And then the professor imparts some knowledge to you while you're sitting in class, similar to what I'm doing now, right? And then you go home and you do your homework. In a flipped class, the content delivery takes place before you come to class. So you watch videos, you do some reading, you may even do an assignment before you even get to class, so that your time spent in class is doing more active learning activities. You do group work, you'll have discussion, and so you're reinforcing the things that the students have already at least looked at before they come to class. And then after class, there may still be some additional assignments to build on. So the course that I flipped is an upper-level graduate course called Information Visualization. And I taught it 3 times traditionally. I made slides, and I lectured, and students had homework. And then I flipped it. So the past 2 times, I taught it flipped. The most recent time, it's a flipped and a hybrid course, meaning that I had on-campus students and online students in the same class. So I'll talk about that as well. So here's a little ad that I made to try and get students to take the class. Note that I mentioned that it was going to be flipped in the advertisement. So what I told them that meant, we'd have reading and homework due before class, we'd have in-class discussion, and in-class exercises. These pictures here are actually images from some of my past student projects, so you can kind of see what type of things that we do in that class. So why did I want to move this class to flipped? Well, the first thing is, in the first 3 offerings of the course, I struggled to find a textbook that I really liked. And then Tamara Munzner, a researcher in Canada, came out with her book, Visualization, Analysis, and Design. And it's a great book. And so I was preparing my lecture slides just like normal, and I found myself just copying bits of the textbook onto the slides, because this is exactly what I want to tell the students. And so I started thinking, well, if I could get the students to actually read the book before we came to class, this would make things a lot easier, and we could do a lot more in class. So that was the first reason. The second reason is that I knew I'd be developing this class for online to be part of our master's program, online master's program in computer science. And so I knew from developing previous online classes that students have to be in charge of their own content acquisition. Right? They're in charge of watching the videos and keeping up with the readings, because everything's out of class for online students. So just in general, what are some benefits or changes when you flip a class? Your class time is no longer professor doing content delivery, but more active learning exercises, trying to get students to talk together and think about the material. The instructor's role changes. No longer are you the main disseminator of information, you're more of a facilitator. You bring questions rather than facts to the classroom. And like I said before, students are responsible for their own basic content acquisition. So the way that I structured this class is kind of our weekly agenda. Before class, they have a textbook reading assignment, and then they had what I called learning checks, which basically were reading comprehension questions that I had them submit before class. So I didn't grade these for content because the answers were all in the book, but the students had to complete these and turn them in before class. So I knew that they had at least read for the answers to those questions. And then in class, what we did was we talked about those learning checks, and I called on different students to answer each of the different learning checks. So they had already read the material, they already had the answers in front of them, so there wasn't as much anxiety about being whole-called in class. Then we talked about any confusion that people still had, and also the textbook author made all of the images from the book available online, so I was able to project the images while we were talking about the related learning checks, and so that was helpful as well. Then students I would have one student present an academic paper related to the topic, and then we broke apart and did in-class work. So I will mention this was a once a week, about 3-hour class, so I had lots of time to cover all of this. The in-class work, we had small group assignments, and then students also were able to plan for their larger group work. After class, they had a traditional homework assignment where they had to take what we talked about and do a programming assignment to implement that. So this is the most exciting part for me. Students actually read the book. This is a quote from one of my course evaluations. I am so proud of this because the book is really, really good. And so I was glad that students were actually reading it. And imagine that. Reading before you come to class actually helps you understand what you talk about in class. Who would have thought? So last semester, like I said, I moved this to a hybrid course. I had 20 on-campus students and 10 online students, and they were asynchronous. So I did have a couple students log in and kind of listen to class discussion while it was happening, but most of them watched and listened to the audio after class. So the big benefit for this is I'm the only person in our department who can teach this class, and it's only offered once a year. So if I made this be only on campus, our online students wouldn't be able to take it. If I made it online only, our on-campus students would have to take an online class. And it didn't make sense that if I was here and they were here, I might as well be in front of them teaching. And that's more fun anyway. So that was the big benefit for me. The way that I implemented this was I got this Jabra USB microphone speaker, and I had a long USB cable. Basically, I sat the speaker in the middle of the room, and this made sure that all of the student discussions were picked up. So we recorded everything with WebEx. Any of the images that I projected on the screen, all of that was recorded. And then I posted the WebEx session online afterwards. And the nice thing is that even if there were on-campus students who missed class or just wanted to go back and review the discussion, they had access to that material as well. Students they still had to present an academic paper. So I had the online students record their presentation, and we watched it in class. It was a little funny because I couldn't give feedback immediately, and there's a difference between presenting something and actually kind of recording a narrated PowerPoint show. We also had group implementation of a visualization problem, and students had mixed online and on-campus groups. So there weren't any groups that were only online students. And then I didn't have any exams, so I didn't have to worry about that part of it. The problem I came up with, I don't really have an answer here. This is more of something to watch out for. Hybrid group work is tricky when you try to mix online students and on-campus students working together. So coordination is difficult, communication can be difficult. And then the in-class group work, that part where the students are actually doing active learning, that was hard to replicate for the online students. They had the assignment, and they would post their answers to our discussion board, but there really wasn't feedback that they would get if they were in class. So that's one thing I still need to work on for next semester. And then a course with a large project may be a little bit more difficult for online students. Most of our online students are online for a reason. They may have a full-time job, they may have a family, and so an upper-level graduate course that has a major project component is going to take a lot of concentrated time, and so sometimes they're not prepared for that. So the bottom line, having a flipped and a hybrid class allowed us to have a flexible course offering. Again, this is the big thing. Students are responsible for their own content acquisition. They have to read, they have to get the basics so that we can talk about some more advanced things, the implications during the class. And then for me, as a professor, my class prep time is no longer spent preparing slides, because that's just really boring. My preparation time is spent thinking about what active learning activities I want my students to do. What do I want them to be getting out of this chapter, rather than telling them what the content of the chapter is. So I'm going to continue teaching this course in this manner, still work on the kinks of how to do some of this group work with online students, but I really enjoyed the experience, and I think the students got a lot out of it too. Thanks.
So we can actually have some questions from the audience, if you have any specific questions.
Did you have any issues with students not reading the textbook and preparing for class?
Not really, because I made the learning checks. They were graded, but not graded for content. So I checked and made sure that they answered all the questions. The other thing is they weren't hard. I mean, it was just, basically you read from the textbook and you can answer the questions. And so then I would call them in the class, and they would have the answers there.
Any other questions?
Did you have students opt out of the in-class and do the asynchronous at times, or did you find that it was the same students in class, online, and then online, it was the online students as engaged as the in-class?
So for the in-class students, I actually took attendance to make sure they were there, because I wanted them participating. I even counted off if they were late, so I actually had students on time to my class, which was amazing. The online students were not as engaged as the in-class students, and so that's the thing that I need to work on and figure out for next time.
What do you think are some of the important physical attributes of the classroom that really help you with the active learning group type of assignments?
So the classroom that I was in was not terribly conducive. It was actually kind of set up like this, but maybe half the size, where you have these tables. So I was not able to move around with the groups very easily. So they would get together and talk, but I was kind of physically prevented from going and being in their group to talk with them. So kind of a more open classroom where you can move things around would make that a lot easier.
You may have touched on this, but was performance pretty comparable between the online and the in-class groups?
I think I'd have to do this a few more times to kind of get to be able to say anything about that. Again, I had some online students who actually were on campus, but the room filled up, so they were able to take the class, but they could come to office hours and things like that. But then I had online students who, like I said, had full-time jobs, had families, and so some of them had more trouble kind of keeping up with the workload.